The Bible is sexist. Throughout the Bible, many verses encourage sexist attitudes towards women, and often these are commands directly from God Himself. I will explain some examples of sexism in this video. Genesis 2 verse 18. In this verse, God creates Eve as Adam's helper, showing the lesser role of women even in the perfect Garden of Eden. Genesis 3 verse 16. In this verse, Eve and all women are cursed with the pain of childbearing and desire for their husbands. God also commands that a husband will rule over his wife. Genesis 16 verses 1 to 9. In this verse, a slave named Hagar is given to Abram as a sex and breeding slave to produce children, and her owner, Sarai, is explicitly mentioned to have mistreated her. Hagar escapes, but then the angel of the Lord commands Hagar to return and submit to her abusive owners. Exodus 21 verse 7. In this verse, God commands that daughters sold by their fathers into slavery are not to be set free like male slaves. Leviticus 12 verses 1 to 2. In this verse, God declares that women who give birth are ceremonially unclean for a week. Leviticus 12 verses 4 to 7. In this verse, it is commanded by God that women who give birth shall be treated as unclean for 33 days after the initial week. If a woman gives birth to a girl, the punishment is even worse, and she must be unclean for 2 weeks and a further 66 days. Finally, a lamb and a pigeon must be killed to make the woman clean as an atonement for her sin. Leviticus 15 verses 19 to 30. In this verse, God commands that after a woman has her period, she must be treated as unclean for a week, and anything that touches her must be treated as unclean for a day. Finally, a pigeon and a lamb must be killed so she can be forgiven. Deuteronomy 19 verse 17. In this verse, it is stated only men can be witnesses in court, meaning the testimony of a woman is not considered reliable. Deuteronomy 21 verses 10 to 13. In this verse, God commands that a soldier who captures a woman and enslaves her during a war can take her back to his house, and after a month can take her as a wife. Deuteronomy 22 verse 5. In this verse, God forbids women from wearing men's clothes. Deuteronomy 22 verses 20 to 21. In this verse, God commands that any woman who loses her virginity before marriage must be stoned to death when attempting to be married. Deuteronomy 22 verses 23 to 24. In this verse, God commands that women raped in town and pledged to be married who do not scream for help loud enough must be stoned to death. Deuteronomy 22 verses 28 to 29. In this verse, God commands that a woman who is raped by a man and not pledged to be married must marry her rapist and stay married to him for the rest of her life. Matthew 15 verses 21 to 26. In this passage, a Canaanite woman begs Jesus to exorcise her daughter, and Jesus tells the disciples to leave her and calls her a dog. Mark 7 verses 24 to 27. In this passage, a Syrophoenician woman begs Jesus to exorcise her daughter, and Jesus tells the disciples to leave her and calls her a dog. John 2 verses 3 to 4. In this verse, Jesus' mother asks him to help her at the wedding, but Jesus rudely calls her a woman. 1 Corinthians 7 verse 4. In this verse, it is described how a woman does not have authority over her own body, but rather gives it to her husband. 1 Corinthians 11 verses 5 to 9. In this passage, women are commanded to cover their heads during prayer, but not men, because men are the image and glory of God, but women are just the glory of men, and women came from men and women were created for men. 1 Corinthians 14 verses 34 to 35. In this passage, women are commanded to remain silent and submit and simply ask their husbands if they want advice. Colossians 3 verse 18. In this passage, women are commanded to submit to their husbands. Ephesians 5 verse 24. In this passage, women are commanded to submit to their husbands in everything. 1 Timothy 2 verses 12 to 15. In this passage, women are forbidden from having authority over a man, but rather commanded to be quiet. This is because men were created first, and it was the first woman to be tricked and become a sinner, so all women are now cursed in the punishment. Then the passage describes that women can be saved through giving birth to children. 1 Peter 3 verse 1. In this verse, women are commanded to submit to their husbands. Thanks for watching. I will make my next video about the problem of evil.